Starting off building a dolly to set the rear end on when I get it out of the backhoe. What we got going on here is this axle is locked up. It won't turn. I got on the internet and one guy had his Planetary break and two pieces got crammed together, which is right in here, which I'm hoping it is, but I don't want to just pull this side off and then have it be inside and have to pull the whole rear end without it being balanced. Okay, the hose on the front, when you take it off, you want to be careful. It does have fluid in it or you might get wet. That's the spline for the short shaft between the reverser and the transmission. All you do is take the 4 bolts out of the yoke and the spline will slide back on the transmission and then slip off. This is the long shaft for the front drive line. The yoke is still on the front end there. You can see that I left one of the bands off and just took the other one loose on one side and turned it, then the drive line will come off. It just slips back towards the transmission and slides off. Then you pull it forward. And this is the top linkage for the differential lock. Might just as well take it all off. Making a couple of ears to go on the end of the rod I'll dangle across the top of the cab for pulling the rear end. You can see them here on the left hand side. I just set this rod up over the top of the backhoe and put a come along on each side, bolted an eye on each axle, and then hooked the come along to the axle so I could drop it down. Real careful here too, if the axle isn't quite as wide as the fenders on the backhoe, so if you're not real careful you'll scratch or you could crack them. I had the jacks underneath the back of the backhoe for safety reasons while I was working on it. Now I'm dropping the rear end down to where it's closer to the dolly so I don't have so far to drop it to put it on. It's front heavy because of the transmission, so when it sits on the dolly, just before I get it on there while I'm letting it down with the come-alongs, I have to put something under the front end to keep it from drooping down a lot further so it all came down level. And trying to get the rest of the stuff off the top. There's a rod that runs from the shifting tower to a plate in the front, and then short rods run from the shifter back to that plate, and it all has to come off. There's 3 bolts, one next to the tower and these 2 here which are hooked to the plate. Yeah, hand me down that smaller ratchet.
Is that supposed to be wiggling the gear shift?
Ouch! And the plate that holds the shift linkage that's bolted to the top of the transmission has 3 bolts through it. It needs to come out. It makes a loop and it has a 1-inch hose runs through the middle of it that will not come down. It's the main power line to the back of the backhoe levers. So that lever has, unless you want to take the hose off, that lever bracket has to come off of the transmission. Can't remember if there's 3 or 4 bolts in it. 2 of them you can get very easy from the top. The other 2 I found out later you can get to very easy going through between the frame and the cab on the left hand side of the machine.
I need to put colored gloves on you so I can see you better.
And the plate that holds the shift linkage that's bolted to the top of the transmission has 3 bolts through it. it needs to come out. It makes a loop and it has a 1-inch hose runs through the middle of it that will not come down the main power line to the back of the backhoe levers. So that lever has, unless you want to take the hose off, that lever bracket has to come off of the transmission. Can't remember if there's 3 or 4 bolts in it. 2 of them you can get very easy from the top. The other 2 I found out later you can get to very easy going through between the frame and the cab on the left hand side of the machine. See also on that bracket the 2 brake lines are hooked to it, which need to come off and need to be disconnected from the hoses. Back to jacking up the front of the axle a little bit, trying to let it all down level. No, it's still coming down. That's not what I wanted to do.
Did you make it? Is that what you wanted to do?
Yeah, kind of. I don't know if anything's still hooked to it. Other than the brake lines, I don't see anything. I'm trying to figure out a way to get this brake line out the way. And once got the rear end pretty much out from under it, then I had to raise the backhoe back up to get enough clearance between the transmission. You can see the brake lines there were still kind of hooked, but then to raise the backhoe up enough to be able to slide the rear end out from underneath it.
Do you need me to push on the other side? Yay!
Yeah.
So that's the thing that's wrong with it, huh?
Well, I don't know.
Oh.
I'm hoping it's right here.
And what is that right there?
Well, this is the axle housing, but it's got the brake and the planetary gear in it. And one of the videos on YouTube showed that the planetary chunk broke out of it here and then got it bound up in there and locked it up.
Ooh. So you're going to have to send it to Lewiston or Spokane or where?
No, I'll take it apart first.
Oh.
Between the last pictures and this, I took the rear end out with another backhoe outside and pressure washed it all off. Got the transaxle out of the backhoe. Now I'm just going to try and take it apart so we can hopefully see what the problem was. We got 2 bolts on this bracket that holds the emergency brake cylinder to the transmission. The cylinder is basically the same thing as a maxi can on a truck. It takes fluid to release it, and when you hit the lever, well, it stops the fluid to it, and then a big heavy spring inside will push it forward and lock it up. These 2 lines are the brake lines. This has oil bath brakes on it, and they're on the inside of the rear end someplace. Don't know, haven't been there. Don't have a shop finish. I don't have a proper place for everything yet. Plugs but no caps. Well, I guess we'll just hope for the best. This is the shifting tower. It's got 4 bolts in it. You just pull them off and then it comes off, blowing the dust around so don't get any inside. And then all the rest of the bolts on that plate need to come out so it can come off. This is a spring that I'm using to lift it up with. Has a real thin end on it. Gets into things like that you have to separate. The old spring, one of the best tools anybody ever gave me. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything in here. The housing is down inside my Dolly, so I have to pick up the rear end and set it off to one side so that it's not inside or it won't come apart. Using the hoist on the truck, get it spread around here, try and get it set back down so this side's up in the air. There are 1/2-inch bolts, which are your 3/4 head, all the way around the housing so that it'll split. Same thing inside. I guess you gotta pull this one side off. Since it's the one that's locked up, let's see if there's anything in it. Tried lifting to see. It's a pretty tight fit. Tapped on the end of the housing. Don't want to tap on the axle, but I tapped on the end of the housing and I'll hook the hoist back up to it. Put a little pressure on it. Then I'll get my little wedge and put it in the top. Break it loose. You want to be real careful and watch the gasket that's in there if there is one, or you end up buying a new one, which I don't think they're probably too much money, but I did save this gasket. When I did get in there, why, planetaries are gone, the center shaft is gone. Like we got a bad planetary. This is the emergency or park brake canister that bolts on the top of the transmission. I was going to take it apart, it leaking awful bad and it wasn't working, so I think they just disconnected it. It works just like a maxi can on a truck. It's got a big heavy spring inside that will lock it up when it doesn't have any pressure from the hydraulics to release it. I'm trying to get it apart, but I couldn't figure out how to get it apart without a manual. And when I called them up, as of the date of this, it was about $150 for a seal kit, or that little cylinder was about $1,000. So I just put it back on and run without it because I'm the only one basically that runs it.